test settings.json. And I really don't care about the JSON file. I want the environment variables when I get to workflow, but locally, I'm going to have basically a copy of app-settings.json. And take this off the screen. I'm a little worried about showing some sensitive information. Just stand by for a second here. Okay, and we'll delete that one. I'm going to rename the bucket to conduit integration tests. And what did I call this thing? I called it integration test settings.json. Okay, and then I'll have a copy of that that'll be like a template for anybody who wants to fork this sort of thing. Okay, so hang on, almost done with sensitive information. Okay, so there we go. This is a separate config file I'm using just for tests. In workflow, this will get overridden with environment variables, but for now, we're just going to do that. Okay, so now the cluster is going to be using, config, and what is it like this? It's Couchbase connection string. Is that right? Couchbase connection string, yep. Okay, and then for username, config Couchbase username. You can see where this is going. This will be, whoops. Password. It's a little bit long. Let's add some carriage returns. Okay, so that'll connect. Now, I don't think I can create a bucket. Maybe I can. Yeah. So cluster exists and it's ready because it's in Capella. We know it's ready. It's kind of always out there. Next thing to do is create a bucket. So bucket manager. Although I could check to see if it exists first. I probably do want to start over, right? Yeah, so this is also kind of makes me a little nervous because we'll be deleting things in Capella, which typically I associate with production, but certainly it could be a developer instance. All right, let's see what happens. Cluster.buckets. Can we use Bucket Manager to see if it exists? Let's see. Cluster.bucket, just .buckets. Okay, so that's what I was just doing. Bucket Manager dot. There's not a way to check to see if it exists, I guess. Get all buckets. Get bucket async, and this is going to be config Couchbase bucket name. All right, yep, bucket name. Okay, so yeah, so I don't need to do this yet. That'll come in later. You know, I can just skip the get. I'll just go ahead and okay. We'll just go ahead and assume it's there and buckets dot drop bucket. config Couchbase bucket. And this will throw an exception if it is there, which is fine. Okay, what's the problem with this? Config is not null here. Cannot assign void to implicitly typed variable. Bucket name. Oh, this doesn't have any. Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll just try and catch this. Just bang it. Just bang it. That's a t-shirt right there. Okay, so basically I'm wrapping this because if that bucket doesn't exist, then trying to drop it's not going to work. So this is fine. This should be reached if bucket doesn't exist. There might be a specific exception for that, and if so, I want to catch that one specifically, so we'll try and see what happens. Okay, next thing you need to do is create a bucket. This might seem weird, I'm deleting the bucket and then creating it. Well, I want to make sure I'm in a known state. So right now, before I run these tests, I don't know if the bucket's there or not. So I need to, if it's there, I want to get rid of it. If it's not there, then this exception should happen, which is fine. We'll just swallow that exception. Because as far as I know, there's not a endpoint that says does bucket exist. There's kind of something like that. There's get all buckets, and that might be a better way to go actually. So I don't have to worry about using exception handling. Okay, so get all buckets. And then I can just see if the bucket I want is in there or not. So does bucket exist? All buckets dot, I assume that's the string of that is going to be the bucket name. Wait, okay. Does bucket exist? Is there any with the key that, well, let's call this B instead. Any with the key that matches my configuration bucket name. All right. And then we can say if does bucket exist, then I'll go ahead and now we'll invoke the cluster to drop buckets. Probably factor that into a method called drop bucket if it exists, but it's fine for now. So now I need to go ahead and create the bucket. Dot buckets, create bucket. So I've done this a couple times already today. We're going to call it this RAM quota minimum, bucket type, Couchbase, and durability level. Wait, no. Take a shot every time Matt says bucket. Yeah, seriously. If I had nickel for every time I said the word bucket in the last 7 years, I could retire. Okay, what is it? I wanted replicas? Num replicas, 0. No need for replication in this integration test. If I had a nickel, oh snap! If I had a nickel for every time I said nickel, I could also retire. But nickel is verboten these days. It is now SQL++. That is the new name. I think superior in a lot of ways because it's a little more familiar than N1QL, nickel. You kind of like the old name better? Yeah, well, that's probably because you hear me say it so many times. You're just kind of used to it. If I put myself in the shoes of someone who's never heard of it, never heard of Couchbase, in fact, if I say, oh, yeah, you can use nickel to query it, versus you can use SQL++ to query it, from that point of view, SQL++, a lot more familiar, less explaining. I don't have to say what nickel stands for, all those sorts of things. It's just kind of a lower friction name, I think. If NR has a similar thing, NRQL, Nurkle. What is an NR? A New Relic, I assume? That's your employer, Calvin's employer. By the way, why haven't I done this yet? I don't know if my bot's actually working. FYI. Coding with Calvin TV. Let's see if it works. Hey! Alright, my bot is working. So at least something works around here. Make sure to follow Calvin. He does some cool stuff. I don't know what his streaming schedule is these days, but follow him, because then you'll get notified when he's streaming, and I promise you he'll be doing very cool stuff on that stream. All right, so now we've got the bucket going, and I'm going to... There is one right now, but it's coming. It's coming. All right, so now I'm going to say bucket equals cluster dot bucket async, and again bucket name. Okay, so at this point I've got a brand new bucket, and hopefully that'll work. Okay, let's just go through this and see if it actually works. Delete me, just a delete me test. Nothing going on there. I do want a one-time teardown, which will basically do the same thing that I was doing up here, where it's going to go ahead and drop that bucket. Because basically once the tests run, I don't want that bucket there anymore. Gone. Now, this might seem a little inefficient, and it kind of is, to create a new bucket, run maybe one test, and then remove that bucket. But the issue with that, it would be more performant to create the bucket, run a whole bunch of tests, and then drop the bucket. Or leave the bucket up there and run every test against it. The problem there is that some tests might not be able to function with certain data already in there. So again, this is all about known state, and this is a problem with integration tests, is that I have to start with a known state. Otherwise, my tests could go haywire and give me false positives or false negatives because there's some data in there that I didn't expect. So unless I start with a known state, these tests are even harder to write themselves. So that's why I'm doing it this way. There's going to be slower, it's going to be less efficient, yes, but it's going to be easier to write tests, and it's going to have better quality tests. So, all right, so I want to basically let's do a ping here. I can't do a bucket ping. I have to do a cluster ping. Sure. Assert that ping is not null. So this is not real. We're just sort of testing the setup code at this point. Okay, and then if I go over to my cloud provider, I hope this will work. If you see here, there's some buckets. I've got 3 buckets right now. There's no bucket called conduit integration test. So I want my code to actually create that. So let's give this a try. Hopefully this config code works. So the benefit of this is that it's going to be the code's going to be a little more concise and a little easier to read, because I don't have to worry about spinning up a container and setting up everything, because all that stuff's handled by Capella here, my DBAS. Database as a service. So here we go. This is the config. Is this going to work? I think so. Let's see. Okay. So that seems to be fine. All buckets. So only one bucket. Oh. Yeah. So I didn't actually create credentials. Let's have a look here. Okay, yeah, I created, I'm using the conduit credentials, so it's only going to return one bucket. What I need to create is some database access for integration testing. So I'm going to create a database access called SVC integration test, and I'm going to create a new password. So off screen, because this is sensitive information. Okay. Copy that, and that is strong enough password. I'm going to give this all bucket access, and again, this is where it makes me a little nervous, because now it could potentially, with these credentials, start deleting data that it shouldn't be able to delete. But I just want to get some work into this point. All right, so I got the credentials in there. So that's good. Everything's looking good. Okay, and so here is my tests again. So now it should return, what do I have, 3 buckets? Yeah, 3 buckets. Yep, there's 3. Okay, conduit, travel sample, Twitch chat. Yep. So does the bucket exist? It does not. So I don't need to drop it. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a bucket. Hopefully this works. Doesn't look like it is. Exception. So it might not be allowed to do from the API. If that's the case, then we got to take a different route. So if it does not exist, then I need to throw new exception. There is no bucket for, yeah, plan E, seriously. There's no bucket for integration testing named. And this might actually be a little safer approach. I need to put, let's just put single quotes around it. Okay, so that means that that bucket has to exist for these tests to run. If they don't, then they're not going to run. And I'm going to go back to that user, and so first of all, I got to create a bucket that's going to match the name in my config, which I called conduit integration tests. So I got to create that bucket, and all the minimums. Yep. And I have to choose replication here. Oh no, I'm on the trial, so I can't do that. And this is all fine. So there we go. Conduit integration tests. Of course, the problem with this is now if I got to delete everything out of this bucket. To run the tests. So hopefully I can delete scopes, right? So actually what I could do is I could run my migrations in reverse. I could run them down. Haha. Okay, bucket name. Yeah, that'll work great. Okay. So if there is no bucket, it will fail. Get the buckets, ping it, and I can't do a drop. But this is where I'm going to do migrate down, and this is where I need to do migrate up. Still a little fragile, because if something fails and doesn't get to migrate down, then it's going to be in an unknown state. But again, just trying to get something to work. All right. This should work. Unless I type something wrong. Okay, there we go. Ping results. Yeah, everything's looking fine. Windows. Oh, because that's the SDK. Okay. Service is 0 though. That's concerning. Why is services 0? I don't know. Okay. So that works. Let's change this one over. Just call it old. Oh, yeah. So I need to do the actual migration as well. Where did I have that at? That was in here somewhere, right? Did I get rid of that somewhere? Ensure index engine set. Yeah. Okay, here it is. Yeah. Migrate up. Bucket equals bucket. What doesn't it like that? Because it didn't do an await. What's the problem now? What is wrong with this? Cannot convert to what? Oh, because, yeah. Always forget those awaits. Okay, there we go. So it passes that in, and then I will run the migrations down. Settings, direction, down. I think, but just by saying down, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to run them all down. Okay. All right, let's see if this works. Whoops. Is this going to compile? Yep. All right. Why is it debug all? Why is... Oh, because this is text. Okay. Yeah, okay. I don't want this in here. I'm going to go in the base class now. And I want to put this in here. Nope, not there. Here. And let's comment all this other stuff out for now. Because cluster is not, yeah. Okay, now I just want to make sure that those migrations run. So let's go ahead and do that. Set a breakpoint here at ping. Okay, we got an error. Value cannot be null parameter services. Huh? What are we talking about here? Is something going on up here? Yeah, let's not do anything with that yet. That might be it. Let's see. Did anything happen over here in the bucket? I don't see any scopes. There's the migration history, which is empty, so looks like it tried to run. Did I not? Yeah, this shouldn't need any other settings. Is it something in the base here? Oh, I think I know why. Because this still is using the app settings, which means it's going to go to conduit. So, see again, this dangerous stuff, right? Okay, so migration is trying to use the wrong bucket, right? If I go to here, but I'm passing in. So it's taking config and it's pulling from the config file, which should be fine. So I'm not using the bucket name, using collection and scope name. So that should work. Okay, because yeah. So that should be fine because I'm passing in the bucket. So that should be no problem. But I'm going to set a breakpoint here and here. Whoops. Just to kind of see what's going on here. Okay, that's probably what it is. It's pulling from the collection, but that should be there. Okay, all right. Let's try this again. Over here, let me get rid of this guy. So it created the document here, the NoSQL migrator document. What? What is the problem? I didn't change the source code, did I? Okay, let's do a rebuild. All right, and try this again. What is this applying source changes business? What? Okay, I don't get it, but let's continue on, I guess. All right, I don't know. Okay, I don't know what that error is all about. Maybe because it's something to do with reflection? What in the world? Okay, so that seems to be working fine. It's just the debugging is, it doesn't like that. Okay, collection. Oh my gosh. Is hot reload getting invoked there for some reason? I mean, that could be it. I don't know why that would be the case. Because it's going back to the web project. User scope name. So yeah, so that's... I don't see why that's going to be a problem. Collection name. So it's coming to this point, and it should be running those migrations. Doesn't make any sense at all. No, it doesn't make any sense at all. I'm just going to run the whole thing. Oh, okay. Now it passes. What the heck? What did I do differently? Oh, well, no, it didn't work. Oh, yeah. It did work. Okay. So it migrated down. What I wanted to see was I wanted to see the actual structures. But they were created, test was run, and then they were destroyed. So comment this out, and then I'll see the actual structures. I'm not sure what the error was. It's something to do with debugging, I guess. Okay, so now I didn't tear them down. Where did my window go? Integration tests. So there's users, right? There's nothing in there yet. Default. Yeah, and there's migration history. So you know what? I actually... Here's what I can do. Again, back to known states. Run the migrations down, just to be safe. So this way it's always in a known state. And then I'll call this up settings. Up settings, ha! Talking about being upset. I'm doing up settings. And I think that'll be fine. Yeah, there's actually a command for that. Let's see if it works. My green screen isn't big enough. Or my camera isn't in the right spot. There we go. Yeah, so this will, if for some reason the migrations were not downed last test run, this will make sure that they're downed before we start again and do an up. I think that'll work because it's actually in there now. Let's just see what happens. So it's going to run them down, we're going to run them back up, and then, did I comment it out still? Yeah, and run back down. So what should be here? It should be an empty array. Okay, that's perfect. All right, so now we're back to plan D. We're in good shape. All right, good, good, good. One Chief Rocka. Hello, what is the best way for me to learn to code? Is it a CPU degree? I'm guessing you mean computer science degree. Or on my own? Ooh, that's quite a question. Well, it depends on what you want to do, One Chief Rocka, if I might call you Rocka. Are you trying to get employed? Where are you trying to get employed? How soon are you trying to get employed? Those are all... this is one of those typical questions, those answers you're going to hear from programmers is, it depends, right? If you just want to learn to code for your own sake, then there's lots of resources. There's YouTube, there's here on Twitch, there's plenty of blog posts and documentation. If you want, entrepreneurship, again, I think the hardest part of entrepreneurship, starting your own business, is not the coding. It's all the other stuff, all the paperwork and project management and deciding what the scope is, all those sorts of things. That's the harder problem. The technical problems are, it's work to do, but it's not, in my opinion, the hardest part of starting your own business. If you want to get employed, we have to think about where do you want to get employed? Because I'm not going to argue the merits of degree versus not getting a degree. There's plenty of people arguing that out there. I went the route of getting a degree. Of course, this was back in the turn of the millennia. So things have changed a lot since then. I believe that my first job I got, I owe that at least partially to my degree. They probably would not have interviewed me if I didn't have a degree. Now, whether that should be the state of things or not, I'm not going to address that, right? But it helped me get my first job. And I learned some skills in getting that degree that applied to my first job, for sure. So I had one class in college that taught me SQL. That is by far the most valuable class I took in my entire undergraduate degree, because I was immediately able to apply that to my first job. It was for Access databases, but it was still SQL. Calvin says he got an internship while working through a 2-year degree at a community college. Yeah, 2-year degree is a possibility as well. Just, there's the how things should be, and then there's how things are. And for better or for worse, many employers are going to look for a degree. Now, sometimes they want a specific degree. Sometimes they just want a degree. My father is in sales. He's a national director of sales for an electronics company. He is interviewing sales reps all the time. His criteria is that they have to have some degree. They don't have to have a business degree. They don't have to necessarily have a master's degree, but he wants them to have a degree. That's one of his criteria that it's on his checklist. So if you have a liberal arts degree, that's okay. It's not a business degree. He just wants a degree. Some companies hire software developers right out of boot camps, or even, they have a GED or a high school diploma is good enough for them. Some companies are like that. So you have to think about, who do you want to work for? If you have a degree, it's going to widen the pool of possible places that will interview you. That's just the reality. Whether that's right or wrong, that is the reality. Now, that being said, computer science degree, that's one way to go. There's lots of other types of degrees that involve learning how to program. Different colleges teach them differently. I went to a college where it was very heavily math and logic focused for computer science. So I learned all about algorithms and Big O and data structures and operating systems. That stuff is good general computer knowledge, but I don't think it really helped me in my career on its own. Hey, Martine, welcome. Martine can give you some great advice as well. Yeah, and don't listen just to my advice, by the way. Calvin, Martine, they all have valid points of view as well. If you're into UX, psychology has served you quite well. That's very interesting. Yeah. So absolutely. Some of the, most influential, smartest developers I know did not have a computer science degree. They had an art degree, a theater degree, a psychology degree. I'm not saying computer science degree is not valid, but it's just, in my mind, it's not like the one path. It's a path. Will a cybersecurity degree help with coding or a computer science degree? I don't quite understand the question, the way it's phrased. I think you're saying, which is better, cybersecurity or computer science? Well, again, depends what you want to go into. Cybersecurity, it's going to be helpful, and they might include coding as part of those types of degrees. But certainly, if you want to go into some sort of security profession, whether it's like penetration testing or some sort of security expert at a company, that's the way you'd want to go, right? You will learn coding along the way, just because that's one of the routes that attackers can take is through poorly written code or flaws in code. So, but I think mainly the focus there is not going to be on coding; it's going to be on networking and things like that. Well, certainly the coding is a part of it. So I would say this is not. If you're looking for a yes or no, do this, don't do this answer, you're not going to give it for me. I'm not going to be very prescriptive. I'll just tell you what worked for me, and that was 24 years ago, whatever. Hey, thanks for the follow, Raka. I hope this is helpful advice for you, and good luck to you. But I would also recommend, this is something I didn't do, that I kind of wish I did, and was harder back then, I think, is find some people, and Calvin, Martine, myself, we all do this sort of thing, is find some people that can help you and give you advice along the way. Not just upfront, should I get the degree, but now I'm in the degree, what should I do? Or how, help me with this concept, all those sorts of things. So find a mentor of some sort. And for me, that was my professors, I guess, which, that's fine. But I kind of wish I had known some professionals during the early stages of my career. That would have helped me in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to finding a job. They can help point you in the right direction, give you references, and that sort of thing. So I would recommend that. That's something I didn't really do. It is a lot easier these days to find those people. For sure. You're getting your accounting degree. I think a tech degree will help more. Well, I mean, if you're into accounting, if accounting is your thing, again, my first job, I worked basically for a bunch of accountants at a large university. And the guy who hired me was doing a lot of coding, a lot of SQL coding. And he was struggling because he didn't have any sort of SQL background. And also he was a director, so he didn't have time either. So that's one of the reasons he hired me, so I could do some coding. But he still coded all the time. He wasn't doing coding because he liked coding. He was doing coding because it helped him solve accounting problems. And so, absolutely, if you're into both of those, accounting and computer science, there are a lot of interesting directions you can go if you find accounting interesting. I did not. I did not find accounting interesting, other than the fact that it got my foot in the door of my career. But there are a lot of ways you can go, and a lot of long-term career paths that accounting can open doors for you on. So, Martine, I would also consider dabbling in code ahead of time if you don't know what area you're interested in, because the field is so vast before committing to a degree. That's a good point as well, because I'm very much a back-end and database developer, but Martine is definitely more front-end focused, UI focused. I think she even dabbles in mobile development, if I'm not mistaken. And Calvin is into his current position. He's into building tools to help developers. So kind of a meta coding, I guess. PWA. Okay. So yeah, JavaScript, front end type stuff. Yeah. So I'd count that as mobile. But yeah, you could focus on native mobile, for instance. You could say, I want to build iPhone apps. I want to build Android apps. I want to build Windows apps. I want to build Mac apps. All these things are different areas with different specialties. But again, my program was very much science, logic, math foundation. We didn't get into UIs at all. We barely got into any sort of, the web was just kind of emerging as a popular thing. So we didn't even do websites. I mostly wrote C++. We were doing data structures and operating system stuff. Sort of the extreme low-level back-end type of thing. But there are colleges that will take the opposite approach. Let's learn JavaScript, HTML, and CSS first, because those are the most popular languages in the world, right? Not C++. Not anymore, anyway. So, okay, so I hope that helps. Keep asking questions, though, and feel free to keep chatting about that topic. I'm going to pivot my stream to C++. Hard pass. I do not miss garbage collection at all. No, thank you. So I'm making progress here with these tests. I'm very happy. So I'm going to see if I can. Let's do a real test. If you go to boot camp, make sure you research them very well. Yes, that's absolutely true. Don't just pick a boot camp. Find a boot camp with a good registration, especially one that has a good job placement rate, right? Because that's going to help you determine the quality of a boot camp. Like any boot camp can educate you in a 6-week period or whatever. But how well are they going to take care of you after you finish that 6-week boot camp? Are they going to be able to place you somewhere? That's huge, I think. But yeah, I mean, again, if they tell you our placement rate is 80% or whatever, research into that. And what does that actually mean by placement? Does that mean number of offers? Does that mean actually getting jobs? Interviews? What does that mean? Okay, so now I'm finally going to get a test. Hopefully we'll do an integration test of the registration request handler. I commented this stuff out earlier. This is service collection. I need that for the test here. Now this stuff is hard-coded. This needs to be, and I can actually, this is using the, yeah, so this is still hard-coded. It doesn't, I don't want it to be, but it is. I still have to face that issue. But I do have to go back and use this hard-coded name. I would also look at the curriculum because of the breadth. I assume you mean breadth of what they plan on covering seems excessive. It probably will be, and I consider that a red flag. That's a good point. Generally speaking, if a boot camp, most boot camps I've seen, they focus on JavaScript, whether that's Node or browser or both, HTML, CSS, and possibly a database. Of course, I would encourage you to learn more about Couchbase, but certainly something like Postgres is a popular choice for like your first database you're learning. Some boot camps don't even touch on databases, though, right? That even might be too much depth, especially if you're interested in front end. Like, you don't necessarily care about database if you want to build good-looking, useful web pages. Database isn't necessarily something you want to focus on. But if you're interested in back-end type stuff, then look for a boot camp that includes a database. But I am a total database guy. I've worked 7 years for a database company, so I'm very much in favor of learning SQL, learning a database to start with. But yeah, if they're like, oh, we're going to teach you 5 different languages and 5 different frameworks and do all that in 6 weeks, yeah, that's not going to really be a very good boot camp, I don't think. It's not going to prepare you in any significant way. Yeah, you still know SQL. That's okay. It's not too late to learn. Calvin liked teaching a tech elevator. He taught Java, JavaScript, HTML, CSS. That's a pretty good variety. The only thing I would say is that boot camps that use JavaScript for both front end and back end, maybe a little less to learn. But of course, Java is a very popular language for back end, so that's a good skill to have as well. So yeah, I would say that mix is probably enough for, I don't know how long tech elevator periods are, six weeks, something like that. Yeah, how did you get into the Java track, Calvin? How did that happen? Certainly, if there's already a curriculum, I'm confident you could teach that, but I just know your background is more .NET than it is Java. 14 weeks. Oh, wow, that's a pretty long program. 14 weeks for full-time, 30 weeks for part-time. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Okay, so that I don't want to use this hard-coded, but for now I will. We'll figure that out later. Service provider, I think that's all I need. Actually, there was something else, wasn't there? Yes, this right here. I need to create that service collection to start with. Not that. It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be the same things from up here. Add Couchbase though, let's see. You enjoyed it, learned a lot of Java, and Spring Boot along the way myself. Yep, Spring Boot. So that's, again, that's a framework you can use with Java. It's probably the most popular one. So I'm adding this Couchbase. So it seems like I'm creating the cluster twice if I do that. I suppose I could just return a cluster here. Don't think so. That's not going to work. Okay, so if that's the case, then I can probably... I probably should have done this in the cleanup anyway, but dispose of this cluster object because I'm going to be instantiating a new one with the DI. It's the ASP.NET of Java. Kind of, right? So in .NET world, ASP.NET completely dominates web development. Like, there might be other web frameworks out there, but they are in distant second place to ASP.NET. In the Java world, there are multiple options besides Spring Boot. So Spring Boot is most popular, yes, but there are other viable options out there. But yeah, that's a pretty good comparison, though. So we're doing this again. So this is kind of annoying that this cluster objects is expensive to create, computationally expensive. But I think this is the way to go to do what I want it to do. So again, integration tests, they're slower. That's fine. We can live with that. Okay, logging, fine. Service collection, is that up here? Yep. Okay, so this doesn't need to be, it's going to be private now. In fact, that doesn't even need to be anything. This just used here in the one-time startup. And then it's going to be, for the test, they're going to pull from service collection, which is what this is doing. Setting up this bucket provider, for instance, and then building it. So that's not going to change. And then this is actually going to run through the test. Question for the book authors in the room. Would you write for Packt if approached? Oh, gosh. Okay. How can I phrase this carefully? I don't want to be divulging anything I shouldn't divulge. I have a friend who was approached by Packt. This friend has written books in the past. And this friend knows how time-consuming it is to write books and how little monetary reward there is for doing so. So this friend thought about it for about a week and then ultimately decided no. But this friend has other friends who are writing books and is definitely willing to help them technically review their books. So that's what this friend is going to do. But in generally speaking, you're saying, basically, would you write for Packt? In my experience with Packt is very limited. I think Packt is doing a lot of author acquisition right now, like a lot. But in general, I would say, what topic do they want you to write on? Because these days, writing tech books, they can be obsolete before they're even printed. So I would make sure the topic is something that's, has a longer shelf life, literal in this case. Then, if you're writing, here's how ASP.NET 7, a guide to ASP.NET 7, might be a useful book, but it's going to be outdated in a year. Right? Martine, don't write books for money. Well, some people do. I would say writing a book has helped my resume. It makes me look more impressive on paper. Again, literally. Manning, yes, I was a Manning author, and I found that experience good. I hope anyway, the technology that I used back then to write my Manning book, I hope that's improved, because it was good. It was just a pain in the neck sometimes. Basically writing a whole book in XML. Apress, I've written a chapter for Apress book, and the experience was fine. Google Docs. Yeah, so Google Docs was an option, or actually I think it was Microsoft Word back when I was doing it. The problem with that for me is all the labeling of diagrams and code samples. If I used XML, those were automatically generated. If I use Google Docs, and maybe Google Docs has a way to do this, but I have to go back, and if I insert a new figure, then I have to go and renumber everything. So that's why I didn't use that method. Okay, I'm just going to run this test and see what happens. Hey, we got here so far. So this means that everything's in there. Yep. Okay. So is that going to work? Ah. Okay. This is really a pain in the neck. Is this a hot reload thing? Yeah, I'm going to have to change this because that is not working for me. Numbering was a pain. Yep, if. The reality is probably more when. I do it again, I'll probably go with the markdown option. Yes, yes, that might work. I don't think markdown was an option for Manning back then. I don't know. This was so long ago when I wrote this book. I don't know if markdown was really around back then. It might have been. So actually, as far as book writing goes, markdown's fine. ASCII doc, in my experience, in my opinion anyway, is a far superior markdown-like format for writing books. So if that's an option, I'd recommend looking into ASCII doc because there's lots of cool things ASCII doc can do that Markdown can't. And it's a lot like Markdown, the way you write it. Calvin has a proposal into APress. While I wait for that, Pack approached me for a separate topic. Definitely a topic that will be out in a 12 to 18 month period. That's discussed right up front. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's going to be up to you. If you want to write a book that's going to be, worthless, not worthless, but severely reduced value in 12 to 18 months. Is that what you mean by out? Or do you mean it won't be available for 12 to 18 months? Calvin, I would personally, I don't know what the market is for this. I would personally think a book on extension development for a Visual Studio or writer or whatever would be a very interesting book. I'm sure there's lots of stuff you've learned that's poorly documented. That would be great to be covered in a book. Released in 6 to 8, then another 12 to 8. Yeah, okay. Ask about what the process is, what review support they will provide. Yeah, that's always good. I went to the book writing thing because there was a book that in my mind needed to be written. So whoever picked it up is what I went with. But ultimately, Manning did have a very good review process. Worked with an editor that helped me a lot along the way, and gave me confidence that it was a well-written book. So, yeah, as far as Pat goes, I don't have any experience with them, so I don't know. And APress, my experience is very limited. It's extensively related, but it's so niche. Calvin, that's the thing with my book my first book was very niche, but I felt like it needed to be written. And so that's what drove me. I was a day away from starting a Kickstarter because everyone was turning me down. And I finally got picked up like right before I hit go on the Kickstarter. But that book is very niche. I'm not going to make my advance back. It's not going to be on the bestsellers list, but I think it's a good book. It's a book that needed to happen, and it's a little bit out of date, but I think a lot of what's in that book still applies to that niche. So you had a book you wanted to write, and they picked it up. Yeah, I think again, that's easy to say, easier said than done. Is to if you have a book in you that you must get published, like that's the way to go. Just find whoever's going to pick you up and go with it. But if it's the other way around, like they want you to write a book for a specific topic, that's a different approach, which I've only been partially involved in that kind of thing. Pact surprised you, yeah. Well, there's a lot of Pact going around right now. I feel like they are really ramping up their acquisition for whatever reason. Which is just kind of counterintuitive to me because I feel like tech books have kind of been in the decline for many years because of the speed at which most of these topics covered in books are just kind of going obsolete. Okay, so what was that whole thing with the hot reload? I don't feel like I really need hot reload much for this project. But I will turn it off for debugging. Let's see what happens. makes you worried because of the chance of it going obsolete. Yeah. No, I just if you know that going in, just as long as you understand that that's what's going to happen. Yeah, it was definitely a hot reload issue. The hot reload was causing something to go on here. Writing about CSS and accessibility is always relevant. Yeah, that's true. So CSS does change, right? There's things that are added and removed from it. So that is a little bit less. The general principles, I think, probably still apply. And accessibility, of course, one of my favorite books. Isn't all about accessibility. If I can find it here. Here it is. It's more about user experience than it is about accessibility, but accessibility is part of user experience. This book right here. I would recommend everybody pick this book up and read it. It is super easy read. And I don't know if there might be a third edition now. This is a second edition. Don't Make Me Think. It's something that even if you're not creating user interfaces, like you're not a front-end developer, there's still lots of great information in here and guidelines and ideas about, well, it's all about web usability, but I think it applies even any kind of software usability. There's great stuff in here about testing, user testing. This chapter here, one of my favorite chapters, usability testing on 10 cents a day. It doesn't have to be a super expensive, long drawn-out process to get useful results. And I've done some of this stuff here at Couchbase. Kind of ad hoc, but it's helped us tremendously. So I recommend that book for sure. Okay, so everything's going fine. Arrange the request. Act. Is the result going to pass? Looks like it's working. It's working. Okay, and then if we go back to here, oh, it's still there. Why is it still there? The data's still there. It should not be. No, I don't want this one. This one. Why didn't that work this time? Why didn't the down work this time? Default. Migration history is there. Okay, I'm going to run this again. Okay, so this should be back to empty array. It's not. Is this not getting run? Because, wait, shouldn't this be a test fixture? One-time teardown, one-time setup. Is this actually getting hit? Yeah, it's actually getting hit. Should be going down. Why is it still there? What's the problem? It was working fine. Now it's not. The test is passing, yes, but it's not cleaning up. See, well, it cleaned up the first time because there's only one person here. There should be two now. It was right here, so this is not a big deal as long as it's actually running the down up here. Let me just copy this all over. Clean up. Okay. Run this again. Okay. Now, oh, whoa. What's going on here? Unambiguous timeout exception. Did I mess something up? Oh, I think I know why. Because, where did I, yeah, right here. Okay, so I do need to make that cluster. Yep. That's why. So I need to keep that cluster open, disposing it later. And there's actually something else I need to do, which I do over here, which is this right here. Dispose the Couchbase service, which is it's service collection. Get required service. Oh. Because that isn't built until, oh gosh. So service provider is where I get that. Okay. Where's this used? Service provider. Okay, so what I could do is I could move this to the base class. And let's make this protected. No, we can make this private. Protected service provider. Service provider. And it's going to be if service provider equals service provider nullable, and then this right here. Like so. And then return service provider. So it's kind of a lazy loading of service provider based on service collection. What doesn't it like here? Why is it saying this is not null? If service, am I doing this wrong? If service provider is null, then service provider equals build. What doesn't it? What's going on? Yeah, that's what I had. That doesn't make sense. Why is it saying this is always not null? Is it because I don't have this on there? Maybe null here. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can use that compound assignment. That's fine. I'm just refactoring crazy here. Okay, I guess. Service provider. Right, service collection is instantiated. Where do I set that at? Oh, it should be right. Oh yeah, right here. Service collection. Okay. Yep. Okay. So that way, when I go back to here, let's say service provider dot get required service, and then close. Make that async. Yeah. Why not? Okay. services. So in one case, it's got some redirections, so that's why I need to go through this. In the other case, I have direct access to the cluster, so I can just do this. And I keep them both open for the duration of the test, which is kind of annoying. But okay, that's fine. Okay, then over here, don't need this anymore. I'm just going to use service provider from the base class. That's all I need. Okay, if I do this, hopefully the test still passes, and then it'll also clean up. Okay, looking good. Oh, you're right, because I'm not actually, yeah, it's not there. Look at that. And okay, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to get rid of this old and busted Couchbase integration test. And we're going to call this Couchbase integration test instead. All right, so running locally at least. Time to commit. Made some progress today. It's not exactly what I wanted to do, but at least it works. Okay, so this is integration test for registration. So let's bring up the my GitHub project. Where is it? Projects. So this is a test for registration. So that is issue number 2. Test using Capella for registration. Now I've got this, but I don't want to include this. I'm adding that to the git ignore. I don't want to commit that. That's got my actual credentials in it. I just want to put the template in there. Because when I do this in a GitHub workflow, I'm going to be using environment variables. Okay, so this is, yeah, a huge difference because it's a completely different approach. So whatever, here's the test. I changed this. Again, this is hard-coded. That needs to be better. Yep, that's all fine. And as a git ignore. All right, there we go. Push that out. Okay. So this is going into update docs finally. Integration test is working with Capella. All right. So now, the last thing I have, this endpoint in this column, is you can see update docs. So what I want to do is look at that endpoint. Looking at users, controllers, and it's the registration endpoint, which is this one right here. So what I'm curious to see is if this XML docs is something that Swagger will pick up, or Swashbuckle, I guess. Hey, can you see this in OpenAPI? Foo model Baz. Okay. So now I'm going to run this actual website. And let's see if there's any documentation here. Doesn't look like it. Wait, is that the right one? No parameters. There's example value and responses. So that doesn't seem to be what I want to happen. So how do I then? How can I add documentation to an ASP.NET Core Web API endpoint that will be picked up by Swashbuckle for OpenAPI? There might be like a attribute or something. To add documentation, you need to use XML comments included in the project's assembly. First, you need to configure to take into account the XML comments, which should be enabled by default in the project. Ensure that your build process creates an XML file that contains the comments. Then navigate to the Swagger generation area, which is represented by C#.NET class file. So you don't always say Swagger file. When you will add the configuration entries to include any XML comments as custom descriptions for the generated API documentation. Basically, this can be achieved by adding the following to your configure services method in startup class. So it says here that it's going to take those into account already. I don't think I'm building any XML files though. All right, let's go over here and let's just see what it has to say. Solution Explorer program. This is Copilot. XML docs are created by default, I think. Okay, I'll take your word for it. Where's my add Swagger gen? Right here. Okay, it's the project properties. Project properties generate. Okay, all right. So there's that. This XML stuff is the new part, I believe. Okay. Project properties to generate XML files. Edit. Well, there's properties. Here we go. Is that going to be in build? You know what? We can just ask. How do I enable XML generation, XML doc generation for this proj, CS proj? While Copilot thinks about that, I'm going to go and look at debug. So does that mean it won't be created for production? Maybe it doesn't need to be created for production. Let's see. TypeScript. Yeah. Linting. Wait, I'm going up way too far. Debug. Open, debug, launch profiles. Okay, let's see. Whoa. Okay, that's not what I meant. Copilot. Maybe build? Yeah, build would make sense to me. Let's see. Generate a file containing API documentation. Is that it right there? Uh-huh. Yep, that's it. Optional path, leave blank for default location. All right, I'll assume that this is taking that into account. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this and put that comment back in. And let's just see if an XML file shows up. I'm not seeing one. Is it in output here? Well, there's this. Look at that. There's the XML. Okay, cool. I learned something new today. All right, and now I will go ahead and run this to see if it shows up in Swagger. Now, I'm still not using Swagger. I'm still mad at Swagger because of the whole token bearer thing, but I think I have a way around that. Look at that. There it is. There's the documentation. Just that, though? Just that part? Hey, can you see this in OpenAPI? There was nothing about the model or the return. Oh wait, there's foo model. There, okay. There's foo model. As a front-end person, I love when devs use Swagger because of Swagger Gen. And as a backend person, I love that Swagger does all this stuff for me. This is definitely something we can agree on. That is a great thing. However, you've missed those early episodes, Martine, where Swagger is trying to work with JWT and Swagger is not cooperating. But we'll get there. I think we have a workaround for that. Anyway, the return value is not. Let's see. It's Baz. I don't see Baz anywhere here. So there's foo, and there's this, but there's no Baz. Okay. Well, anyway, I can go ahead and say, just add some documentation here. So this endpoint is how I want this to appear. API users, this is going to be the endpoint. I don't need to say the word endpoint because they're all endpoints, but this will be register a new user. Parameter name is registration information. And then this doesn't actually return anything, but it's going to return user. I guess returns a user, right? A view of the user. So let's bring this back up again. Register a new user and registration information. I guess that's it. So I don't know if there's much else we can really document there. I could link to the conduit spec. That might be something I could do. This registration endpoint. Can you put a link? Can you put HTML in here? So if I wanted to see the spec, I could just click on it and go right to it. Probably not, but it's worth a try. I don't like the way it's highlighting this. Yahoo. Well, but it's doing it down here too, so that's fine. Maybe that's fine. Nope, doesn't like it. Does it pick up the remarks tag? I don't know. Is that something like this? Remarks? And do I have to put in a remark? No. These are the remarks. Bada bing, bada boom. Hey, there they are. There's the remarks. Can I put HTML in there? That would be pretty wild. Yep, that works. That'll be just fine. Okay. Conduit spec for registration endpoint, and I'll just make that a link. Oh, nice. Yes, it is nice. What else could go in there? Anything particularly interesting? Anything particularly useful? What would you want to know if you were consuming this endpoint, Calvin? Or Martine, or anyone? This just describes the endpoint. This links to the spec for the endpoint. This just says what this information being passed in is. What else would be useful? I'll say as a front-end developer, Martine, what would you want to see documented in here besides what you're seeing right now? I might want to see some more information about a code if something goes wrong, because that's part of the spec as well. Error handling. Yeah, these are possible. Yeah, error. Okay, there you go. We're on the same wavelength here, Martine. Yes, I think knowing what errors would happen in, besides success, I know that this one could return forbidden or unprocessable. Those are two options. How do I add that to this documentation? Maybe difference between it done messed up versus no users in collection, something like that. Yes, those are the different errors here. So forbidden means user already exists. Unprocessable means there is some other validation error. Email wasn't valid or password wasn't strong enough, something like that. Those are the two options there. But how do I get that to appear in the XML? Let's ask GitHub Copilot. Oh, GitHub Copilot or Calvin. A couple attributes. I don't think it's bad request. It's you could probably just copy and paste that from somewhere, right? Status is forbidden is one of them, and then unprocessable. Is there a message that can go with those? Sure did. LOL. Let's see. Status code. Type. Like I can't put a string in there. So what does that look like? Okay, so there's, yeah, what I'd want is a better description. Maybe some links. I don't know what links would be. How do I get a more interesting message in there? Is there any way to specify a message with those attributes? Yes, you can specify a message. Produces response type and then string. I don't think that works. Response code 201. Oh, I like that better, actually. I like that better than those attributes. There's no strings in there anyway. Okay, now we're talking. All right. I like that a lot. Okay, so the error handling is it 200 or 201? This is supposed to return. Well, what does this return, I guess? This returns 200. Okay. So 200 returns the newly registered user. So I'll get rid of these. Forbidden is, see, I have to remember the codes now. I can't use the enumeration. Forbidden means user already exists. User with this email address already exists. And then 422, the registration information was not valid, e.g. Invalid, invalid email, weak password, etc. 201 might make more sense for that endpoint. Okay, I'm with you on that. I'm not seeing anything in the spec about that, though, which might mean that it's up to me. Okay, so so it's not okay then. What is the 201? Is that created? Okay. Oh, what are the password requirements, email requirements for that way front end could do some better UX guiding or validation as well. Okay. Yes, I think that's a good point. It is not really specified in the spec, unfortunately. In fact, the spec is very weak about what kind of passwords are allowed. So for instance, here's this example. Jake, valid password. No, we're not doing that. And then I covered email validation in the previous episode, and I also talked about password validation. Those are somewhat contentious issues, but I think I made common sense decisions on that. But yeah, that would be good to have in there. What would make it valid? So let me see. This Swagger. So it would be interesting if I could put what's this, schema, example value, and schema, like something in here. How do I put that information in there? So these are all the objects. Registration submit model. It's the same thing down here. I wonder if I can add documentation to that object. Registration submit model. Could I put comments on this? Hey, does this show up? Maybe a validation attribute on that property? Okay, that might also make sense too. Let's just see if that shows up. Submit model. Look at that description. So that's cool. This is the registration submission information. And then could I put on this something like this is username can be no longer than 100 characters, something like that. Username must be unique. Must be unique. It can be no longer than 100 characters. Is that going to show up? Look at that. If I go to here and click on schema, also shows up. That's pretty cool, huh? Also needs to be required. Username is required. Username must be unique. This is great feedback, Martins. This is what you get when you have UI people and UX people in the house. Was it 100 characters? Let me go. Registration. Let's see. Registration. Registration for validator. I did. Where's my base validator at? It was shared. They call it shared validator. Username. 100 characters long. So this is kind of lame that I have to put this in two places, but for the sake of documentation, this isn't actually code, so that's fine. All right, email. Email must, email is required. Must be a valid looking email address. Foo at bar is, foo at edu is not valid. Foo at bar.edu is valid. Okay, and then password. My password requirements are currently all these. And yes, you're allowed to object. But I discussed these in the previous episode. Password must be at least 10 characters long, must contain at least one digit. for one of my clients, this is from Martine, when they create a new endpoint, before it's even created, the back end and front end get together and duke it out. That's how it should work and what info we need. It's working really well and really helping with dev time. As it turns out, we think of radically different things. Absolutely true. That's one great thing about this Conduit project, is that all that spec has already been, as you put it, duked out. So it's already been created. Now, it's not a particularly great spec because it leaves a lot of details up to me. But yes, absolutely is important. Communication, who knew? Again, back when I was saying, who was it asking about entrepreneurship and a degree? The hardest part of entrepreneurship is not really the coding. I mean, I'm not saying coding's easy, but the hardest part to me is communication, the management, the project management, all that kind of stuff. I say duke out because sometimes it gets very lively. No kidding. Developers have strong opinions sometimes. Calvin, my favorite time deving anything back end, front end was when I could pair with the front end UX person. They were the same person in this case. Yeah. And I think that's, a good reason why pair programming is so valuable is because it helps to build that communication. And so without that, the UI might have a very different view of the back end person and vice versa. So if they work together, they can, have a better understanding of what's going on. And of course, bringing the customer into play as well is also helpful. But look at this. This is largely due to two things. One is project management. I have a column that says update docs. So it's a clear step in the process is making sure documentation is good. Number two, this is kind of fortuitous for me. We had Martine in the room who has great UI experience and opinions and said, hey, what about this? What about this? And so thanks to that, I got a few lines of comments. Did not take me that long to do. And we now have a very well documented API here. Now, it's not going to be perfect. There's still going to be misunderstandings and miscommunications, but we have a better starting point. Thanks to those things. The coding here wasn't the issue. The technology was not the issue. I did a little Copilot. Calvin did a little Googling, and there we go. But we created something good. So I'm happy with that. Yeah. We got all the information you need here to create a registration submission. Time to commit. And this was number 2, right? Added endpoint documentation. So all I did was add this generate documentation file setting, which we won't have to do ever again. Added this little snippet. I should probably comment that, in fact. It's not exactly obvious, but this will use the XML doc generated by .NET to document the endpoints in Swagger in OpenAPI. Also don't need that second variable. What? What the heck? String and string. Yeah, I guess I don't. That was pure OpenGPT or ChatGPT there. Oh gosh. Now, probably want to do some error checking here, because if this file doesn't exist, that could be a problem. But I think it's probably okay for now. We can also call this something different. We can call this Conduit API instead of your API. Okay. So added that. Good. Users controller. Just added a bunch of comments there. I've expressed my disdain for comments in the past, but these comments are absolutely necessary because these are This is external documentation. So this is, people who can't or aren't reading the code or aren't working on the code need to read this in order to interact with this application. So these kind of comments are absolutely necessary. But they also have all the same pitfalls that comments have. Oh, not commit. I'll do a push. And we're just about time. So we've made some good progress today. Thank you very much for your help, everybody. Let's just go ahead and double check this. Yep, XML comments are there. So guess what? First done of the project. It's only going to get faster from here. So, hallelujah. That's fantastic. Yay, yes. Thank you, Martine. You helped us get to done today. And thank you, Calvin. Great conversations. Got good work done. I'm not super happy about integration testing, but it is at least working. We can revisit that later if we need to. But that's it for today. It's just about time to wrap up. It's time to go, what do they call it? Invade? No, raid. We're going to raid somebody on the Live Coders team. Who do we got? The usual suspects, C# Fritz and Finite Singularity, and me, and this guy, which I think is not in English. Yes. So I think we'll just go Finite Singularity. I haven't rated him in a while. Finite Singularity. So I hope you join me over there. Say hello to Finite Singularity. Calvin, thanks for stopping in. Appreciate it. Thanks for your help today. I hope you all have a good one. I'll be back on Friday morning, again, 9 a.m. Eastern U.S. time. Please, love for you to join. Great conversations today, and the channel gets better when you're all here. So we'll see you again on Friday. Bye-bye.